Welcome, welcome, welcome in, everyone. Welcome to Care Concierge with Care Patrol, where education is the heart of everything we do. Today's topic is the Ombudsman, which is a service that we discuss with many of our clients, certainly when touring communities with them. And it's a topic that, like many of our topics, was suggested by a former attendee to one of our Care Concierge sessions. And we thank you for being here. It's so nice to see so many names that are current and continue to join us. And I appreciate your support of what we do in terms of offering CEUs. And I appreciate your support in terms of what we do as Care Patrol. We're aging care navigators or referral agencies, if that's what you know companies by that name. We do that service. We work with clients and advise them on what their options are, both Medicare and non-Medicare services, help them understand how to look at providers, what to look for, what questions to ask, and how much things cost or how you qualify, how they're paid. And we do all that for free. We're paid only when our clients use private pay services like sitters or assisted living or retirement community placement. And we appreciate you remembering us when you have clients and patients who may express a need or a question. You know, because we tour communities with our clients, we really sort of have our finger on the pulse of what's happening inside the buildings of each of these communities. And so we can tell you if a key staff person has left or if there's been an incident report. And I think that's very helpful to our clients. And I think it's very helpful to our referral sources, knowing that they can trust us to do the right thing for their client and also the right thing by their client. So we appreciate those of you who refer Care Patrol services. And of course, we appreciate all of you for everything that you do every day as social workers and nurses out in the field. As you may know, we're accredited by the Alabama Board of Social Work, and we're also accredited by the Alabama Board of Nursing. And we're accredited by each to offer 1.0 contact hour for today's session on the Ombudsman, again, a requested topic. In order to receive this credit, you must do our evaluation, and our evaluation is password protected. The reason we password protect the evaluation is that it allows us to show the Alabama Board of Social Work that you sat through a live or classroom-like hour versus a recorded hour. And by having the password protection, this shows that you listened to the entire hour, sat through it, and completed the evaluation. The evaluation is online, and I'm going to read the link to those of you now that are expecting me to do so because you're participating by phone or working at your desk or doing whatever doesn't allow you to see the screen. Let me read for you now today's evaluation link. It is https://www.surveymonkey.com /lowercase r/ all uppercase letters and numbers 6 P as in play Y S as in Sam M as in Mary Y 9. That's today's evaluation link. Remember, it is password protected. Everyone who does an evaluation will receive a certificate and this presentation in an email from me. and nurses will be loading your hours onto the ABN website for you within about a 7-day span. So everyone receives a certificate to turn in, and nurses will be posting your hours as well. We appreciate you for being here today. Again, our topic, the Ombudsman. We have 3 objectives. The first is really fairly simple. It's define Ombudsman. What is it? What is an Ombudsman, and what services do Ombudsman provide? And then we're going to jump right quickly into the work of the long-term care Ombudsman and what they do. And then we're going to discuss long-term care residents' rights. As ombudsmen's, at least one faction of what they do, or one function, is to help uphold resident rights for those of our aging population who are living in skilled nursing or assisted living communities across the nation. Those are our objectives for the ombudsman. So y'all know, I know you do, what is an ombudsman? You know, we encourage discussion, and we encourage you to join us in the chat room, whether it's just to say hello to your colleagues or share your own observations. If you're new to Zoom, you're not used to the chat room, move your cursor up to the top of your screen or down to the bottom, and a bar will appear. On that bar is the word chat with a little icon. Click on that and share your thoughts. Does the patient advocate is what Miss Smalley says. Thank you for answering my question, Miss Smalley. I hope you're having a good day. Well, they can be patient advocates, but ombudsmen really can be advocates for any number of people. Ombudsmen are usually appointed by some sort of governmental type agency, and they generally are appointed with some degree of autonomy, some degree of independence from the agency that appoints them. Now, ombudsmen, in most cases, or really in every case, investigate complaints, and they attempt to resolve those complaints, although usually their recommendations, no matter where and what capacity one is working, may not be binding. Instead, they may simply refer into mediation or some other way of obtaining satisfaction for all the parties involved. So the prototype of the ombudsman was developed during the Qin dynasty in 200 years before Christ, and then later in the Joseon dynasty in Korea did the same process of an ombudsman type person come into play. And that person was a secret royal undercover inspector who was often appointed directly by the king and was sent out into the local provinces to both monitor the government officials under the king and also understand what the populace was thinking. And so this person would be incognito, in disguise, and find out and report back to the king or someone else what was happening in the populace. The Romans had something similar, where they had undercover folks who would mix among the plebeians. And if you're wondering who the plebeians are, they are you and me, the common folk, not the elite or the aristocracy. Now, I'm speaking for me. You may be elite and aristocratic. I am not. And so the Romans certainly had the same practice. The term itself, ombud, is Swedish and Norwegian and Danish, and it essentially means representative. Or it may mean proxy or attorney. In other words, it's somebody that is authorized to act on your behalf. So the general meaning remains. It's someone representing someone else, or it may be someone with a commission, meaning someone sent from a commissioner to do a specific role. Ombudsmen also aim to identify systemic issues in whatever branch of government or industry in which they're looking. And the goal is to understand if there are any systemic issues that may be infringing upon the rights of people to service or other things. On a national level in the United States, most ombudsmen have a fairly wide mandate to deal with an entire public sector. And then we can see that ombudsmen may be also appointed on a state or even a municipal level, not just the national level. Then there are some that are restricted to a certain arena, such as the long-term care advocate, which we will discuss in just a moment. And more recently, you may have noticed or heard about children's ombudsmen for issues relating to children and children's health and children's welfare. So ombudsmen, again, can be state officials. They can be appointed to check on government activity. And if they substantiate the complaint that was brought to their attention, they publish a report in which they make recommendations for change. Many private companies and universities and not-for-profits also now have ombudsmen that work within their branch. They may work to serve internal employees, they may work to serve the management function, or they may serve other constituencies, even outside the organization. They're structured in every case to function independently and most often report directly to the CEO or the king, if you will. And they generally are upheld by the International Ombudsman Association, or IOA, standards of practice. Now, it's key to note that ombudsmen do not typically have any other role within an organization. So they would not be an employee of a company, or they would not be someone on the board of a nonprofit. They would have no other role in the organization so as to remain impartial. And ombudsman services have been growing across the US and Canada, for that matter, since the 1960s. What does a long-term care ombudsman do? Do y'all know? I know you do. Allison Smalley already knows. They're patient advocates. What all does that encompass, being patient advocates? What does a long-term care ombudsman do? Well, the ombudsman program, long-term care ombudsman program, was created in 1972. It was a public health service demonstration project, and it was targeting the needs of those who were living in nursing homes at the time. This demonstration consisted of ombudsman type programs across 7 states, and it was transferred to the Office of Aging in 1974, so 2 years later. In 1978, Congress amended the Older Americans Act to include the requirement that each state develop a long-term care ombudsman program. And the 1992 Older Americans Act added a new provision that required that the Administration on Aging establish a permanent national ombudsman resource center. The Older Americans Act, protects older Americans living in healthcare facilities like assisted living or nursing home, and it ensures that certain standards of care are met for all residents. It is a federal act. Every state is required to have an ombudsman program, and each state is required to build within that program its own team of paid staff and of volunteers who advocate for the patients in these settings. They are advocates for residents of nursing homes, board and care homes in many states. We don't really have these in Alabama. They're not per the ADPH regulation anymore, and assisted living facilities. And not only do ombudsmen handle complaints, they may also provide information to those folks who reach out to them on how to find a facility and what to do to get quality care once within a facility. Ombudsmen are trained, and they're trained to resolve problems, and their point and purpose is to assist with resolving complaints. However, all complaints and all complainants rather are kept confidential. So the network within the Administration on Aging, within the Ombudsman program nationally, has a network of 4,291 volunteers and 1,835 paid staff across 53 states. Most are housed in a state unit on aging, such as in Alabama. Nationally, in 2022, the ombudsman across the nation investigated 198,502 complaints, and they provided information about long-term care to over 400,000 people. As you can see in this graphic, there are 53 state ombudsmen, so we would, assuming that they would be counting either having multiples within one state or counting Guam and Puerto Rico, I believe, and maybe the U.S. Virgin Islands as part of the state ombudsman program. In 2021, they provided assistance totaling overall to 377,000 people. They conducted 151,000 visits in 2021 into, get this, over 35,000 different long-term care facilities across the nation. And they provided information and training once there to over 240,000 staff. Ombudsman attended 1,100 family council meetings across the U.S. in 2021. They attended 7,296 resident council meetings, and they provided 1,434 training sessions to long-term care staff. So, as you may know, in long-term care, there must be a resident council established. And one of the persons and one of the purposes of the ombudsman is to help establish and manage and monitor these programs, not only the resident councils, but also the family council meetings. The three most frequent nursing home complaints handled by the ombudsman in 2021 across the U.S. Were discharge or eviction were the number one complaint. So complaint about being discharged or evicted, responses to requests for assistance within the facility, and then reports of physical abuse. That was the third most frequent complaint handled by the ombudsman, and 71% of all complaints were handled to the satisfaction of the resident. And that is the ombudsman's charge, is to satisfy the resident who either made the complaint or about whom a complaint was made on their behalf. So they have a resolution of over 70%, which is very, very good. The three most frequent complaints in assisted living or board and care homes would be, again, number one, discharge or eviction complaints. Number two would be issues around receipt of and administration of medications. And third would be the housekeeping, laundry, pest control, those things about the environment. Now, the program worked to resolve and did resolve over 70% of 164,299 complaints across 35,000 different facilities. That's amazing work that they did. So does a long-term care ombudsman only investigate complaints? I think I've answered that question for you already. Does a long-term care ombudsman only investigate complaints? Well, No, they don't. And one of their support mechanisms is the National Association of Local Long-Term Care Ombudsman. And there are other organizations that ensure that ombudsman's programs are kept going and ongoing and that their needs are being addressed. And the reason that they need this support is that in addition to identifying and investigating and resolving complaints, and again, 174,000 last year, 164,000 last year. They also educate residents, family, and facility staff about residents' rights. And this is very important, about good care practices and about similar long-term services. So they do a lot of the same work that we do at CarePatrol, which is making folks aware of what options exist out there for them. They ensure that residents have access to an ombudsman. So they're present, they're able to be reached. They provide technical support for both the residents and family councils, as I discussed earlier. They're advocates for change to patients' rights to improve the residents' quality of life and their quality of care. And they provide information, as we said moments ago, to the public about what services exist and what rights exist and what policy issues should be considered when looking at care, care facilities for one's loved one. And they also represent residents before governmental agencies, so in the court, for example. And they seek legal, administrative, and other remedies. So anybody can use an ombudsman, including residents, family and friends, or even employees of long-term care facilities. And again, these are kept confidential. We have a comment, which is, Ms. Hutton, the role of an ombudsman typically involves investigating and addressing complaints. They act as impartial mediators to resolve issues between individuals and organizations. However, their exact duties can vary depending on the context, such as ombudsman in government, corporations, or other institutions. Well, thank you so much for saying that. I think you were restated in a much really better fashion what I had stated earlier. So thank you for providing clarity to what I was saying, Ms. Hutton. And thank you for having the courage to speak up. And I hope others will feel confident about adding their opinions to what we do here, not only today, but each time we get together. What does a long-term care ombudsman not do? What does a long-term care ombudsman not do? Do y'all know? Well, ombudsman programs do not conduct any type of licensing or regulatory inspections or any type of investigations. They do not perform adult protective services investigations, although they do refer to adult protective services from time to time. And ombudsmans do not provide direct care for any residents. But as Ms. Hutton said so eloquently, they do many, many other things that vary based on the need. So does the long-term care resident, this is a question you may know, does the long-term care resident need to grant permission to the ombudsman for the ombudsman to represent them? What do y'all think? Does the long-term care resident need to grant permission? Remember now, these are confidential investigations. So does the long-term care resident need to grant permission to the ombudsman to represent them? Ms. Fowler, you say yes. Ms. Horton, you say no. Anyone else hazard a guess? Well, they handle a variety of complaints about the quality of life and care. And not all complaints are about the care of the facility. Some complaints may be some related outside agency or service, such as a Medicare or home health or hospice. They can also receive and respond to complaints from individuals other than the resident, but they need the resident permission to investigate or share information. So, Ms. Hutton, yes, they have to have the consent first due to confidentiality and privacy. Yes, those who said yes, right on, you were correct. Ms. Hutton, I think maybe you may be an ombudsman, and if not, there's so many of you I feel could teach these courses if you would. If you ever have a bent to where you want to have your voice out there through us, please let me know, because there are so many people I think who are teachers and have something to say, something to give. So the Older Americans Act does require the ombudsman to have resident consent prior to investigating a complaint or prior to referring that complaint out to another agency. So when someone other than the resident files the complaint, the ombudsman then is tasked with having to try and determine, to the extent possible, what the resident would want. Now, of course, they may visit the resident to see if they have similar concerns and want to pursue a complaint. And while there, they will explain the role of the ombudsman and why they're there. In fact, they'll talk about the complaint and the investigation process. They'll share information about residents' rights. And then they'll ask questions. They'll ask about the residents' quality of life, their quality of care, their level of contentedness. And then they'll try and understand the residents' capacity to make decisions. So, do they have capacity to give consent? And if the resident wants the ombudsman to act, then the ombudsman will investigate the complaint and continue communication with that resident throughout the investigation, keeping them abreast of how things are going and what the ultimate outcome is someday. If the resident cannot provide consent, if they do not have capacity, the ombudsman will try and work with a resident representative, probably a family member, or follow just the programs, policies, and procedures within that level of care if they don't have a representative. So the act says that, excuse me, that the inaction or decisions that may adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare or rights of residents, and this includes complaints about abuse. This is what the act itself says, is that the ombudsman is to take action whenever action or inaction or decisions may adversely affect. These are directed by the residents' goals for the complaint resolution, and they were limited here by federal disclosure requirements. So the role in investigating an allegation of abuse, which is what the ombudsman does, is different than adult protective services and state licensing and certification agencies. They're not looking at whether there's an allegation of abuse necessarily, or they may be, it depends. Ombudsman programs attempt to resolve complaints. They do not gather evidence. They are not trying to substantiate abuse. They don't want to understand necessarily if abuse occurred or did not occur, or even if a law or regulation was violated. What they're trying to do, again, is to resolve to the satisfaction of the resident their complaint. And if necessary, and with the resident's consent and the resident's permission, they then may also disclose info to an appropriate agency that could have regulatory oversight in the event that a regulation or law was violated, and in the event that a penalty needed to be enforced. They could and do reach out to APS, Adult Protective Services, within the Department of Human Resources to file complaints. Then DHR or APS then act on those complaints as well, and they have the right to bring in court action. They may have other legal remedies or administrative remedies that ombudsman might bring about. And they may even reach out to law enforcement if the alleged abuse or neglect or exploitation did, in fact, occur and if the resident is in agreement that they want this to be done. But federal disclosure requirements prohibit, I think someone mentioned this earlier, prohibit ombudsman programs from being mandatory reporters of suspected abuse. So that's interesting to me, maybe interesting to you. Well, who represents the long-term care ombudsman? So, you know, something we talk about with dementia patients is that 60% of the time, the care recipient or the dementia patient outlives the caregiver. And so, what we're saying then is that when you are a caregiver, you have a lot of strain on you, and you may give and give and give of yourself to where there's nothing left to give, and that's the end of you. Well, ombudsmen do a great deal of work. So, how do they do it, and how are they supported in doing it? If you wish to be one, how would you, or what organizations would you look to? Well, one would be NASOP, the National Association of State Long-Term Care Ombudsmen. And then there's also the National Association of Local Long-Term Care Ombudsmen, or NALCO. And there are other relevant organizations that you can investigate across the U.S. that exist to support and provide information and technical support to ombudsmen. There's the National Ombudsman Resource Center, or NORC, and that website has information, resources, and news from ombudsman's programs that can support and inform others across the nation in similar circumstances. And that's part of the National Long-Term Care Ombudsman Resource Center that provides state long-term care program assistance. That center's objectives are to enhance the skills, knowledge, and management capacity of the state ombudsman's programs, and to enable them to better handle residents' complaints and to represent their residents' interests. They're funded by the Administration for Community Living, as put in the Older Americans Act. The long-term care ombudsman enforces residents' rights. What are those rights? Well, we'll go through them. And I'm doing this because I think it's very important, because it is really the crux of what ombudsmen do. I also think it's very good information to repeat for many of you who may not have seen or been aware of this or had a brush against it for some time, maybe since leaving school. So residents' rights are guaranteed by the 1987 Nursing Home Reform Law. And this requires nursing homes to, quote, promote and protect the rights of each resident, end quote. And this admonition places a strong emphasis on the nursing homes to provide for the opportunity for dignity and self-determination of the residents. Emily Scott, privacy, self-determination, free from abuse and neglect. Right to self-determination, says Ms. Smith. Thank y'all for answering my question. Nursing homes must meet federal residents' requirements rights if they participate in Medicare and Medicaid, and the overwhelming majority do. In fact, I don't know of any that don't participate in Medicare and Medicaid. Some states have residents' rights in state law as well. And these would apply to other things like assisted living. And we've done the assisted living rights and regulations as part of this series of CEUs. You can find it on YouTube. In fact, if you go to YouTube and just type in the search bar, Sean Barnes CarePatrol, you can pull up about 100 CEUs, watch them, take the certification, and we'll send you a certificate or post your hour on the nursing website. So a person living in a long-term care facility basically maintains the same rights as somebody living in the larger community as you and I. And one good other resource for you, and I want you to be aware of about ombudsmans and about resident rights, where there's listed therein, is this National Consumer Voice, and that has a tie-in to the Ombudsman It's one of the programs that support them. Oh, Miss Scott, the veterans homes do not participate in Medicare or Medicaid, but still fall. Thank you for pointing that out, Miss Scott. I knew that, but didn't speak properly. Thank you for correcting me. So, because most do, and the VA, according to you, Miss Scott, also follows these rules, nursing homes have a right to a dignified residents have a right to a dignified existence, to be treated with consideration, respect, and dignity, to be free from abuse, as pointed out earlier, neglect and exploitation, also free from misappropriation of property, freedom from physical or chemical restraints. Their quality of life is to be maintained or improved, not detrimental. They have the right to exercise these and other rights without interference or coercion or discrimination or fear of reprisal if levying a complaint. They must live in a home-like environment and have the use of personal items as much as possible, with equal access to quality care and security, again, of possessions. Nursing home residents have the right to self-determination in their terms of their choice of activity and schedules, healthcare, and providers, the right to choose their own attending physician, no matter who the attending is at the community. They have reasonable accommodation of needs and preferences, such as this, and they are able to, and should be participating in developing a person-centered plan of care for themselves. They have that right, and that right includes the personal and cultural preferences that makes that person-centered care plan unique to them. They have the choice about designating whomever they wish to represent them. They have the right to organize and participate in resident and family groups. And again, ombudsman programs exist to help establish and support these. And they have the right to request or refuse treatment or discontinue treatment. So the right to self-determination is included in the Older Americans Act. The right to be fully informed of the type of care that would be provided to them and its risk and benefits. The right to be fully informed of any changes in their plan of care or in their health status. The right to be fully informed of all the rules and regulations, including a written copy of these residents' rights. Contact information for the ombudsman is to be included. That is a right. And the state survey agency and reports are to be made available to the resident upon their request. This is a right, as well as any plans of correction that may have been instituted, either levied by the complaint of the resident or not. They must receive written notice before change in room or roommate, and they must have every information or notice or paperwork put to them in a language they can understand. This might be Spanish, it might be Braille. Nursing home residents have the right to raise grievances. So they can present grievances without discrimination or fear of retaliation or fear of discrimination. They can prompt efforts by the facility to resolve these grievances and provide a written decision upon request. And they have the right to file a complaint with the ombudsman or the state survey agency. They have a right of access to individual services, members, and activities inside and outside the facility, visitors of their choosing at any time, and the right to refuse a visitor, the right to access to their medical records, the right of access to their personal physician, and the right of access to persons from state surveying agencies and the ombudsman. They have the right of access to assistance with sensory impairments if they have these, such as hearing aids or, as again, Braille. And they have the right to participate in social, religious, and community activities. They also have rights regarding their financial affairs. In fact, residents have the right to manage their own financial affairs. They have the right to information about each of the charges for any service they may receive, whether it's health care or otherwise. They have the right to obtain and have personal funds maintained for them. So $50 per month for those on Medicaid is deposited by the facility in a separate account for each individual that's interest bearing, and they can use that money for personal expenses. And they have the right not to be charged for services, whether performed under Medicare or Medicaid or private insurance or the VA or others. They have the right to privacy, both personal, financial, and their medical affairs. So, not just the right to privacy around their medical chart, but anything about them. They have the right to private and unrestricted communication with anybody they want at any time they want. And they have the right to privacy during treatment and the care of their personal needs. So, not to have the door open if you're helping someone change, for example. They also have the right during discharge or transfer to appeal that proposed transfer and not be discharged while that appeal is pending. They have the right to receive a 30-day written notice prior to discharge or transfer that includes the reason for the notice, the effective date, so when does the 30 days come due, where they are suggesting that they go to, and also knowledge of the appeal and the filing rights of appeal. And then the name and contact information for the long-term care ombudsman is to be part of that written 30-day notice to allow that resident to file a complaint, and during which appeal, they would not be discharged. And they have the notice of the right to return to the facility after they are hospitalized, for example. So we see this often in dementia care. We may have residents who go out to a behavioral floor in a hospital. They have the right to return to that facility, provided the facility can continue to safely meet their needs. So what then, y'all? And I wonder if any of you are, what are the qualifications to be an ombudsman? And are any of you on this call ombudsman, or have you thought about being ombudsman? And I don't believe, as I've read in the literature, that the plural of ombudsman is not ombudsmen, it's ombudsmans, I believe. At least that's everything I've seen. But what are the qualifications to be? Well, ombudsmen in every state are required annually to visit every long-term care facility. They additionally visit to check on residents with their complaints or concerns. And volunteer ombudsmen, like paid ombudsmen, are advocates. To be a volunteer ombudsman, you must be at least 18 years old. You must have reliable transportation. And this is a little more nuanced. You must possess genuine care and concern for older adults, as I do. You must also pass criminal history check and screenings for conflicts of interest. I do not believe I could be an ombudsman because of what I do may be a conflict of interest, but it certainly is an interest of mine. There are no experiences required, and the training and ongoing supervision and support are provided by all of the agencies and websites and links that I've mentioned earlier. Those same links are available at the end of this presentation. The most important requirements are compassion, respect for the older aging folks, and quite frankly, common sense, mixed with a positive attitude and the ability to communicate with others effectively. And then, of course, having time. So most volunteers don't work more than 1 or 2 hours per week, but they do work 1 or 2 hours per week, which adds up over the course of a year. There is a curriculum that one would undergo to be an ombudsman. It's a free course. It's 36 hours of certification and training, which includes classroom, self-study, and in-facility training. So up to 7 hours of that 36 might be independent. At least 10 would be in the field, and about 16 to 20 hours of classroom style training. The curriculum itself is divided into 10 modules. Each of those modules builds sequentially upon the other. and then each volunteer would then, upon completing or during that time span of completing this curriculum, would have a 3-month internship. At that point, the managing local ombudsman would refer that volunteer to see if they could be certified, and the state long-term care ombudsman would make a final decision as to whether to certify that person, or you in this case, to be an ombudsman. And then once certified, you must do 12 hours of continuing ed annually, which would be a picnic probably for y'all who are social workers to only have to do 12. So again, here are some support programs. NORC provides support, technical assistance, and training. Here's a link here, ltcombudsman.org about. That website is filled with information. It serves as a shortcut to access all of those services quickly, and provides training opportunities, resources, and additional information. And that's our CE today. So we've had a little bit of a quick one, and I apologize. We've still made it long enough to provide 1.0 hour to you. Our password, I'll type into the chat room for you, is LTCOP. Those are all capital letters, and there's an acronym for Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program, LTCOP. You must have that password in order to complete the evaluation. The evaluation link is https://www.surveymonkey.com/r/ all uppercase letters 6P as in play, Y, S as in Sam, M as in Mary, Y, 9. That's our evaluation link. Our code word is all caps LTCOP, the acronym for Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program. Thank you all for being here with us today. If you have any further questions or just want to say hello to one another, please place the link in the chat. I will. Here it is. The link is in the chat for those of you who need it. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. We appreciate you. Hello, Ms. Hunter. Hello, Ms. White. Thank you for being here. I recognize all of your names, and I appreciate you for joining us again and again. I'm hoping someday to make this a little bigger series, and always would like your help in helping me to reach more people and serve more people with not only our CEU services, but our CarePatrol services. So if you ever have the need or have an aha moment and you think, wow, Sean could really help some people with this, let me know. I'd love to know about it. Thank you for being here. Please join us on Monday of next week. We'll have Pam Strickland back, and Pam will be talking with us on Medicaid liens and land rights. You may know that she is with MAPS, or Medicaid Application Processing Services, and has probably done over 18,000, I think, of these applications in the course of her career. So she's going to teach us on Medicaid liens and land rights. And then if any of you have been signed up for our CEU at the end of the month, we're going to have to reschedule that from the 29th. So just be aware, I've changed it already in the link itself. But if you're registered to be with us on the 29th, just know we won't be here with you that morning. Thank you all for being here. The link is not working right. Is anyone else having trouble with the link? Ms. Fowler, you did or did not have trouble with the link? Everyone's having trouble with the link? You need to type it in the whole link, Ms. Fowler. No problem with link. Okay, great. Great. If you have problems, just email me, sbarnes@carepatrol.com, or call me at 205-482-8759, or text me and I'll help you out. No issues. Okay, great. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for everything you do. Hope you have a great week ahead and stay warm and dry.